What does it mean to reclaim what was never truly lost, only silenced? To turn memory into music and history into something that you can feel in your bones. In today's special episode of School of Purpose, I'm joined by Avanti Patel, vocalist, composer, and the force behind O Gaanewali, a hauntingly powerful music experience that revives the voices of India's courtesans. But this conversation goes far beyond the stage. It's about what it means to listen deeply, to forgotten women, to ancestral echoes, and to your own voice as an artist. We trace not just the making of O Gaanewali, but the making of Avanti herself, from the discipline of classical training to the vulnerability of indie releases, from archival deep dives to finding presence, power, and permission in her sound. It's about emotional inheritance, about sensuality as selfhood, about discipline in the age of distraction, and about how to scale intimacy without losing soul. Whether you're a creator, a listener, or someone learning how to carry what came before while still creating what comes next, this one is for you. Thank you so much, Avanti, for joining us in School of Purpose. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Mansi. Pleasure is mine.
So, Avanti, before we dive in, I would like to
Yeah,
begin with. I know, O Gaanewali is going to be a huge part of this conversation, and so much of your
yeah.
work is about reclaiming memory, music, and meaning. But before we dive into that legacy, I want to ask you something more foundational. When you
Hmm.
close your eyes and think of your own artistic voice, not what you do, but more importantly, why you do it. What do you see at the
Hmm.
core of it all, and what is the question that your art keeps returning to?
I think I don't think there's one question for sure because art is something that happened to me. I don't think I chose it as much as it happened to me. Maybe when I started to realize that, oh, this is already a part of my life, I started to make more deliberate and conscious decisions with my art. So if you ask me about a foundational thing that grounds my work or my art, I think the fact that I have been with it for so long, it almost feels like a it's a personification. It's a human to me that I've built a relationship with my art, and that relationship is ever evolving. It's something that puts me through the grunt. It gives me happiness, it gives me sadness, and it's something that I have learned to love and learned to sort of be with. So that I think is unique because it does ground me. It does help to see art as something that's separate from me but so close to me.
I think it's beautiful that we are starting with the why, because O Gaanewali just doesn't feel like a performance, right? It almost feels like a reckoning or a remembering. I like to think of it as a restoration wrapped in music. I once read a quote which said that the opposite of memory isn't actually forgetting; it is silence. And I believe your show breaks that silence. It revives the voices of India's courtesans, women who shaped musical traditions but were pushed into margins of history. I would like to understand that what did it feel like emotionally and artistically to enter that space and give voice to what was probably once quieted?
So I think when you ask a question like this, it feels very heavy, right? Because it feels like, oh, we set out to do something, and here we are giving a voice to someone, to the artists who didn't have it. Quite to the contrary, I think with this particular show, um, the music has always been, like I mentioned, a part of my life. And over the years, as I started to become a more, I'd say, conscious artist, I realized that there were things outside of the music that I had learned that I wanted to talk about, and gender is a large part of that. So for me, understanding the form, understanding the women who popularized the form, and being able to give, if not a holistic picture, but a snapshot of the lives that they lived to the people who listen to the music, became the foundation or the core of the show. So even though the show is very much bound by the music that we've heard of, artists like Gohar Jan, Begum Akhtar, Janki Bai, Zora Bai, so many, Girija Devi, so many wonderful names, but how is it that the same music can be made relatable to people today? What can we do to make it bring this music outside of its time capsule and make it contemporary without changing anything about it? So that, I think, is the bit which has worked for the show, which has worked for the stories that we're telling. So it doesn't feel like a show where someone's, being talked down to. It doesn't feel like a show where you're explained something to, like in a classroom. Instead, it feels like a conversation. So the history, the music, the stories, the fun parts, the difficult and sad parts, all of those are sort of given to the audience in an experiential manner where nobody feels like it's too heavy, but at the same time they engage with it, they grapple with it, they are present for those 90 minutes.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And you're right. If you look at it from a certain angle or a lens, it may seem very heavy. But the fact that you are consciously trying to, move away from the heaviness of it all and give a holistic experience, I think speaks volumes. On that note, Avanti, I would actually, for our viewers and our audiences who haven't really maybe seen the show or
Hmm.
experienced the term before, could you just, let us know who were the Ganewalis? Why and why is it important to reclaim their voice through your music?
Okay. So the Ganewalis, also known as Tawaiffs, also known as courtesans, often called Baijis, were women musicians who performed in kothas. They performed semi-classical music as we know it today. So the forms Thumri, Dadra, some folk forms like Hori, Chaiti, Jhula, Sawan, Gajri, Tappa, and also Ghazal. Now, these women, because they were in the quotas, unfortunately, were likened to sex workers and prostitutes when the British came in. And the status that the quotas held, which were actually centers for culture, centers for art, centers for music, often, people from royal families would send their kids there to learn tehzeeb. And it was a center that was full of not just art and skill, but also literacy and literature. So all of these aspects of the Tawai's lives suddenly got erased. And at this point in history, where India is trying to reclaim its identity as a nation, and the British Raj are trying their best to sort of come in and fight this identity on both ends, somewhere in the middle, the Tawai's got sandwiched, and their identities, their work, as well as their music completely got erased in the process. So these women were the first to actually um, sing on the gramophone. They were the first to commercially exploit their work, which male artists back then didn't do. So all of these stories that happened in a short span of time in history, say late 1800s till 1930, 1940, we try to talk about that in the show. And more than anything, we want people to learn about their music, because often when people think of courtesans, they automatically think of, say, Umrao Jan. They're thinking of Pakiza. They're thinking of maybe now Hira Mandi. And even though there's merit to these stories and some of it is true, it's a very glamorized and Bollywoodized version of the courtesans that you see. It's also very, very dance centric, which was definitely one part of some of the artists. But the folks we are talking about, the women we are talking about, were musicians. In none of these series, in none of these films, do you see a woman sitting down with her tanpura and learning music. You don't see her practicing her music, and that would take up 3-4 hours of a day at least. So that's something that we were really, keen on bringing in front of the audience, that this is the part of their lives that we want to talk about, and this is their identity as musicians that we want to bring in front of you. Because if you listen to your ghazals like "Ay Mohabbat," "Aaj Jaane Ki Zid Na Karo," "Deewana Banana Hai To," kahan se aaya hai? Where has this come from? It has come from their practice. It has come from their talim. So O Gaanewali is a show that celebrates this art, celebrates the identity of the women, and tells their stories in a way that people can relate to it, understand it, and also give context to the music that they like.
I would just like to say, firstly, what a fabulous concept, Avanti. I was completely blown
Thank you.
away when I came across it. So, I mean, personally, I think it is just fabulous what you guys are doing over here. And, when you talk about these women, you were right. They were artists, they were storytellers, sometimes they were rebels, and yet history often silenced them. And you're absolutely right when you say the Bollywood image of them that we have is maybe not as close to the truth as we would want it to be. Which brings me to my next question. When you began exploring their legacy more deeply, did you sometimes feel the weight of that inheritance? Because it could not have been light, or maybe there one story or one instance which shook or, changed something in you personally.
Hmm. So this is again a very difficult question because I don't think I'm in a position to say that I have inherited anything. The music that I'm practicing today is in has been influenced by so many things that I have learned over the years. But the music that they sung and the music that attracts me is Thumri Dadra. And somewhere I feel like because I want to know more about the style, I started learning about it. I didn't inherit it, which is again a tricky place to be in because there are people who have inherited that art. So, as somebody who's doing a show about these women, there's a thin line where I could feel like, am I an imposter? I'm not a part of this tradition. I don't have hereditary lineage, but I'm still talking about these women. I'm talking about their lives. I'm talking about their music. So that became a burden for me to bear. And I realized that I think this tends to happen with anybody who's doing research or anybody who's immersing themselves in a culture which is not their own. As you keep learning more and more and understanding it further, you realize that there are parts of it that even the people who have inherited it are probably not following anymore or don't relate to anymore because those things have happened in the past and now we live in the present. So I started to apply the lens where I took on the role of a researcher. I took on the role of somebody who's trying to empathize with the stories more than tell the stories. So a lot of work went into and still goes into reading more and more and more about them and learning about them through anecdotes from people who probably heard them live or interacted with them in the past. And our gurus who have given us so much of their music, which they have also gotten, the legacies are very straight. It's very beautiful. They have also gotten from somewhere, 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 and they sing it as their own. So that's the beauty of Hindustani classical music, which is also the beauty of folk music because it's the music of the people. As people learn the forms or take the forms, they change it and they present it. So all of these things, I feel it was a learning curve for me, and the burden came from grappling with each of these things one by one.
Yeah, it must have been quite a journey. You've performed O Gaanewali over 50 times now. That in
Yeah,
itself is almost like a long voyage, right? Has the
yeah.
show changed according to you? And have
Oh
you
yeah,
changed through
yeah.
it? Really?
So
And
when you
have
ask
there
me
been.
as the
Yeah.
go on, go on.
No, no, please go on. I want to, yeah,
So the
let you
show has
complete.
changed in the sense that I think my co-artists either love me or hate me for this. But every time we have a new set of shows or we have a new season of shows, I change it up because there's so much that we want to talk about. There is so much that we want to sing. How can that be fit into a 90-minute show? So it initially started as something that I wanted to do because I felt like there's so much information and I want people to know more about it. And dheere dheere, I realized that this became a point that people waited for. So folks have come and watched the show 5 and 6 times, and that has just really taken me by surprise. There's this incident that I remember. I had gone to watch a play at Prithvi Theatre, and I was in the line to enter the theater, and this person came running, and he said, "Are you that same person who did O Gaanewali?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." He said, "Oh, you look very different." I said, and this is how I dress regularly, right? But in the show, we're depicting history, so we're in costume, we're in makeup, we all look different. He said, "I have watched the show 6 times." Then I just like my eyes widened and I said, wow, I can't believe you're saying this. And then we went inside, we sat, and there was still 5 minutes for the show to begin. He came somewhere, he found me, and he said, look, these are the notes I took from one of the shows, and I emailed them to myself. And in retrospect, when I was thinking about this moment, it was so heartwarming because, I mean, at no point did we expect this to happen from a piece of art, you know. So it's beautiful that the show has changed, keeps changing, and will keep changing because there is just so much to explore.
And I think it's just unbelievable, right? That's the best kind of validation one can
Oh
get
my
an
god,
audience
yeah,
signal.
it's
I'm
amazing.
sure, right? Like, I was getting goosebumps thinking about it. What an
Yeah.
experience it would be for somebody to walk up and say things like that. And it's actually, I think, powerful to hear how much the audience has also shaped the show's soul, right? How people
Yeah.
react, what they look at. And I suppose with legacy work, there's also that tightrope. How do you bring
Hmm.
tradition forward without turning it into a museum piece? How do you strike
Correct.
that delicate balance, where you're honoring classical roots without becoming rigid, also making experience emotionally accessible to your audience that you talked about in the
Hmm.
beginning, who may be new to this world, so you need to make it accessible, you need to make it relatable for them as well. How do you balance that tightrope?
So some parts of the show involve a little bit of music education. So in the beginning of the show, we tell the audience what we're doing. We tell them what this form is about. We explain the song form. We also explain the rhythm pieces. We demonstrate some things. So anybody who's new to the form doesn't feel overwhelmed by what's going on, because each piece that is presented is, I mean, everything is more than 5 minutes. Each piece is more than 5 minutes long. And in the age of reels, people are not used to listening to something for more than 90 seconds. So our very first song, the opening song, is usually 9 minutes long. So the audience is still with us. That's because the music has some power in it. The music is improvised, and the audience gets to appreciate that because we explain it to them. So some of those elements are part of the show. Another very important thing, which was something that I wasn't sure of, but people told me that this is how I should go about it. When I was writing the show, I'm not a writer, I'm a musician. So I kept telling, all my friends and my guru that, I can't write this show. I need somebody who's a writer to, write lines and, make it a nice theater piece. And a couple of them said, no, but you only write it. Then I said, but I can't, I'm not somebody who writes literature. I may be articulate, but I'm not a writer, there's a difference. Then my guru said that, no, it's okay, just write it in your way. I think you will convey it the best. And that encouragement from my guru helped me look at this piece of music and art literally through my personal lens. So the show's entire script is in Hindi and English. So people who have nothing to do with classical music, people who may not actually speak heavy Urdu, Hindi, uh, Brajbhasha, Maithili, all of the languages that are part of the songs, still understand what we're talking about. Because we talk to them like I am talking to you today. And there have been places where we've done the show where we've done it entirely in Hindi. We've done this show in Solapur where we did it in Marathi, Hindi, and English, because luckily most of us
Yeah.
could speak these languages, right? So that's also the beauty of the show, that we're trying our best to make it accessible, at least from the language perspective. Ki urban audiences who come and attend the show should understand what's going on. The music shouldn't feel like it's from another time, and there is, an unsaid distance between the audience and the stage. Even though the artist is sitting in front, there's a barrier. This show attempts to break that barrier. So we talk to the audience. We ask them, can you hear us properly? There are parts where we quiz them. There are parts where there's this little interactive section where we talk to them about some very interesting stories. So all of this is happening so that people feel like they're part of the same space, and the stage and the audience is not divided into two parts.
I think that's wonderful, and I love what you said about bringing in your own personal lens, right? I mean, a writer may do a great job, and there's no taking away from writers. But I think when you bring in your own personal nuance, your own complexity, and how you view the thing, there's a certain passion which cannot be mirrored, right? When you're enacting
And
somebody
that
else's.
allows us to change it up, right? Because I'm the one who's bringing in a perspective. If I read something new, which I feel like sharing with my team and telling them that, hey, I think we should talk about this in the next show. And if they all agree, then we just add it to the next show. That kind of flexibility, that kind of ability to rewrite a show every time we perform it, I think that really makes it unique and special.
And I think retains the freshness as well, right? If somebody is watching the show six
100%.
times, they are absolutely taking away something new every single time, right? And
Yeah,
somewhere we also evolve as people. So I think our evolution is also reflected through the work we are doing. How I was writing or interviewing 3 years ago is not how I'm doing it right now. So I
exactly.
think
And you
that
should be allowed
sort of,
to do that as an
yeah,
artist,
of
right?
course, it cannot, otherwise it becomes stale and stagnant, that,
Yeah.
in today's world has no place. Avanti, when you're not on stage telling stories, you're often releasing singles that feel incredibly intimate, So there's Koi, there's Sandesa, there's Saiya Bina. And these songs have a very deeply rooted personal and almost genre blurring sound. I would like to understand, how do you decide what story or emotion belongs in a show, and what belongs in a song? How do you come to that conclusion as an artist?
So I have two answers for you. One is the cutthroat commercial answer, which is that for a live show, we have to think about making some money. We have to think about monetizing something. We have to think about being able to pay all the artists who are involved in it. But in streaming platforms or songs that we put up on streaming platforms, unfortunately, the system doesn't reward us in any way. So unless I go extremely viral and have some 10 million streams, I'm not making a single paisa. So that, in a sense, even though it's ridiculous and it's a whole different topic to talk about, uh, makes me think about why should I make anything commercial? Then this becomes a true expression for me. And then the second answer, which is not that cutthroat, is that I think for me, my independent music is definitely a part of who I am, is definitely a part of the music that I love, the genres of music that I have grown up listening to, the styles that I enjoy, and it's my sort of search and evolution in my own sound. So it the format goes beyond just vocal singing then, right? There's composition, there's writing, there's production, there's arrangement, there's a certain visual language that now you have to use when you release music. So that space allows me to explore my artistry through this medium. And a live show is beautiful in the sense that you immediately get to see what the audience is perceiving. You immediately get a clap, you immediately get a boo, immediately get a woo, right?
Yeah.
So all of these things are happening so instantly and so much in the present that that's a whole different world and that's a whole different high. So these two things are definitely separate, and the formats allow them to flourish within their own self in a way.
Yeah, I completely agree, because when I heard your songs, they almost feel like, if I may say so, diary entries. They are deeply felt, they are deeply personal. And, you have an upcoming release on August 1. So, first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But, we would love to understand what chapter of your story is that particular song telling. Could you reveal a little bit?
So this particular release is part of, I would say, we are calling it the digital extension of the show O Gaanewali, because a lot of people who came for the show, another like sort of ode to the success of the music that these women have popularized. They would ask us, "ये किसने गाया है? आप इनका नाम दे सकते हैं? Can you tell us the names of the artists?" And just recently, I did this thing where on the invitation that they get or the ticket that they get, there's a little QR code which they can scan, where there's a list of resources, a lot of information, books, articles, YouTube videos that they can access. So I would direct them to these things, saying that, ये Begum Akhtar का है, ये Gauhar Jan का है. You can listen to it here, you can listen to it there. And then people said, no, 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 no. We want to listen to your version. And I was like, oh, okay, come for the show, right? Like, because the format of the music is improvised. It's best enjoyed live. So we've not wanted to record it. But after people started seeing this over and over, we realized that, hey, there's more to this than just telling a story that needs to be told. It's about creating a legacy of music which goes beyond something that has been done and helps people look into the future. So this entire album that we are currently releasing, this is on August 1st. I think it's the second last song that comes out. So it's the fifth song of six, and it's our version of the songs that people have loved from the show. Some they haven't ever heard even on the show, and they're all songs that tie in with the genre of Tumri Dadra and Ghazal that people can now listen to when they're traveling, when they're at home, when they're having chai.
I think it's wonderful because, sometimes as artists, I think you don't realize the impact you're having. So you feel you need to be limited to, okay, we cannot release songs. And then the impact that it has on everybody around you, I think it's overwhelming and humbling at the same time, right? And yet, one of the
I agree,
biggest,
yeah.
the most satisfying moments of being an artist and just seeing the kind of
I'd also like to
impact.
add one more thing because,
Yeah.
with today's world, being an artist, you're told that you have to have an impact. You're told that you have to create this, you have to create that. And often, once you create it, it's very underwhelming and anticlimactic because none of that happens. Because the world is too fast paced. From the time you have written a song to the time you release it, the world has moved on already. The thought is over, right? So, with O Gaanewali, I never approached it from this perspective because I had been approaching work from that perspective and realizing the anticlimax of the whole thing. So I said, no, this show is for the music. This show is for something that we genuinely feel passionately about. And what's been overwhelming is the fact that people have taken it up in a way that we didn't expect. People have loved it in a way that I never thought the show could do. So that surprise was overwhelming for me. And maybe, like you said, the authenticity of what we're doing or the passion that we're putting into it, somewhere they can sense it. Somewhere people feel like being a part of that, and that's probably what's emotionally holding them on and
Yeah, but
keeping them
passion
on.
is contagious. I completely agree. Passion is contagious. So even if
Yeah,
you said, right, that there are people who may not have known of the art form, may not have heard of it, and yet when they feel it, then it's just your passion that is getting to them, right? And they are sort of getting
yeah,
swayed.
yeah.
Avanti, you talked about initially in the beginning of the conversation where you said that, sometimes one faces the imposter syndrome, that am I equipped to do
Hmm.
this? I don't have a legacy or I don't have an inheritance coming. And I think this is the bane of most musicians, artists, they all wrestle with doubt, especially when they're creating something that hasn't been done before. Did you ever
Hmm.
hit a wall like that during your journey? A moment of, oh, I'm not sure this will work. How do we push through this? And how did you, overcome that? Because I'm sure there was some at least.
There are constantly many. And I think it's not just musicians, but I think anybody in this world is constantly faced with a crisis of who am I, whether what I'm doing is relevant, whether what I'm doing is right, what is wrong. So all of these questions go beyond, I think, creation of art, but specifically about our show and the work that we're doing. Every single time I have something that I'm extremely unsure of. And what's wonderful is that I'm also the producer, writer, and also the performer on the show. So often I see my co-performers and they're so chill. They're like, oh, we had a show today. So nice. This, that. And after the show, they're like elated and they're like, ecstatic. And I've gone home and I'm still anxious because I'm also looking at a much larger picture and there are so many things. So after a recent show, I remember I just wasn't doing well mentally. I just felt like maybe it didn't go well or maybe it didn't go as well as I thought it should have gone. And we had recorded the show and the footage came in about 15 days after. I sat with the footage and I watched it. And I watched it with a friend of mine and I told her, hey, it was good, huh? She said,
Not
yeah,
bad.
whatever. We've been telling you that. What is wrong with you? Like you just don't believe us. And she went on this whole rant. And I said, yeah, but you guys, your job is to tell me I'm good. You guys love me. You're not objective.
And it's good to have that unobjective,
Yeah,
unadulterated support
yeah,
also sometimes, you know.
yeah,
And I think we are often our own harshest critic, right? We will be
yeah,
much more harder or much harder on ourselves than people around us are. But I think that speaks a lot to your humility as well, right? Because you're constantly, even if you've done this so many times, yet you feel moments of self doubt. And honestly, it's a relief to hear that doubt is part of the process, even when the work feels
yeah,
divinely
yeah.
led, right? It just feels more relatable, more human, and I feel okay. I'm not the only one. But then comes the grind, right? Because you said that you have to think about
Hmm.
so many other aspects. There's the business of art, making
Hmm.
something sustainable without letting it flatten out your spirit. It's, I think, once again, a very delicate balance. And you bring together text, music, history, performance in a very layered way. And you said you were donning multiple hats, right? You're not just performing, you're not just singing.
Hmm.
The kind of work, I think, comes from a deep place. But where do your
Hmm.
ideas come from? What
Hmm.
sparks inspiration? Is it a phrase? Is it a feeling you can't shake? Is it something somebody said? Something more unexpected? I am very curious as to how an artist's mind works. What sort of triggers them on.
I'm also curious because very often I think about where I'm getting certain things from and I don't have the answers. But I've realized over time that it's always in moments of silence. It's always in moments where I'm not actively seeking something. It tends to be when I'm reflecting on something that I may already have done, read, consumed, experienced, right? So it's beautiful that it's experiential in that sense. But I still can't point a finger and say that, this moment. I think that's also people who can do it are such great storytellers because they've learned
True.
to catch the spirit of something in retrospect. So there are things that I can do that for, but I don't think art is one of them for me. I'm
Yeah.
still experiencing moments and figuring it out as I go, and I don't know what it is that's really inspiring me on day in and day out.
But this is the answer I get whenever I'm interviewing anyone. And
Yeah,
nobody is able to give a tangible answer because I think there is no tangible answer, right? You
yeah,
can't say, oh, this is the philosopher's stone where I draw my inspiration from.
correct.
It
Like
is
I
not.
saw this tree and I wrote this song. Yeah, this
Yeah,
is not
I know.
me.
Saw this train. I wrote this. I know. So it's just something that can't even be explained. Sometimes it's just a sensation. Like after an overwhelming day, something, even if it's a cup of coffee, even if it's a hug from a child or somebody you love, you just feel there's a sense, and you just, the
Yeah.
creation comes out. So I know, and I always sort of measure this up, and I say, yeah, nobody has given me a tangible answer. I'm guessing there is no tangible answer. I've interviewed so many people. Okay, but now coming to the business side, I know we touched
Yeah.
upon it a little in my last question. You didn't just create a show, you are also scaling a model, right? So
Hmm.
from choosing venues to managing tickets, from marketing to, getting funds, what were the growing pains of turning this into something sustainable?
So I think, like it has happened to me with many other things, I didn't see the full picture when I started. I started. I knew I had something and I started. So for us, what helped was a lot of support from the fraternity. Because when we first did our show at NCPA, that was, I had applied like people apply to perform at the NCPA. I had just sent in a proposal and they had liked it and they said, let's do this. And it was just as the pandemic was getting lifted off, lockdown was getting lifted off. So we performed in March 2022, and I think that show, when I realized that it's happening for sure and somebody is giving us money to do this, I realized that okay, now this is the opportunity to start creating a future for it. So what would that look like? I had already done a small theater show which had scaled over time with another group of artists, and the folks who were managing that show, I thought would be the best fit for something like this. So I got in touch with a friend who currently is managing our show. They're called Wide Wings Media, and I said that, here I need your help and experience to scale this. It can start small, but I want this to grow. How can we do it? You have done it with this show, so help me. So that's how we started working together, at least with Wide Wings Media. And after our first NCPA show, I shot the whole show. We made a show reel, we made a proposal, we had a lot of, emails in place, press content in place. Everything was sort of put together, and we started pitching. We matlab I say we because it is a collective show. But if I were to break it down, I was the one who was pitching it because I had written it. I knew what I was selling. Nobody else knew what really we were doing. So started pitching it to venues, started pitching it to festivals, started sending out cold emails, cold calls, you name it. Started maintaining Excels. And dire dire we realized that okay, if we were to put up our own show, what is the economics of it? How much can be sustained? How much cannot be sustained? Now, another learning I had from the theater side of things, because I'm a musician, I hadn't done theater the way theater folks do it, that there's a percentage sharing system with whatever money you make. So in the first year of the shows that we did, or the first 9 months, all the artists came on board with a percentage share promise. So nobody really got a fixed amount as a fee. If we got more money, everybody got more money. If we got less money, we didn't make money. Right? So they all have now records of very odd figures being transferred to their accounts, but that's how we started. And slowly, I think seeing how the model works, seeing what things we could spend on, seeing where our tickets are getting sold, seeing venues where, okay, people are buying a ticket of 500 rupees. We can sell a 300 seater with a 500 rupee ticket. What does that leave us with? So calculating things backwards. That's how we slowly scale the show. And I think after the first year of doing the show and a couple of also lucky breaks and network kind of advantages, we managed to bring the show to a place where now I don't have to shell anything out of my pocket to make a show happen. So if I'm doing a standalone show, then the ticket sales, and of course now we also sometimes have sponsors who come on board for a couple of shows, will come support that show. Everybody gets paid from that show, and we have some money that's left off to put in the production for the next show. So all of this is really run like a small business. And I think artists often don't get told to look at their work as a small business, but this show has given me a crash course in understanding that producing something like this requires you to see it as a business, requires you to create long term relationships with people, requires you to take some expenses on in the beginning and trust that if you're doing it right, it will get paid off in the future.
And I'm sure there was a lot of discomfort in it as well, right? But there is no growth without
Yeah,
discomfort. So, I'm sure you had to learn and
100%.
unlearn a lot of things, things you would have never thought about. You had to now, plunge headlong into them and figure them out. If I had to ask, what was your biggest learning about how to preserve the soul of a show or of a
Hmm.
business while also chasing scale, what would you say?
Uh, I think with this particular show, rehearsals has been a big thing. Even though we've performed it now almost 60 times, we rehearse before every show. And sometimes I can sense that my artist colleagues are like, "Mm, we just performed, why are we rehearsing again?" But it really matters. It allows you to look at the music through fresh eyes, listen to yourself freshly, decide if you want to change something up before the show. It allows you to create a space of improvisation between your colleagues, right? And to keep that energy up during the show. So for us, the soul of the show has come from rehearsals. The soul of the show also comes from the fact that it's improvised music. Matlab, even if I'm singing the same song in rehearsal, same song on stage, it will sound completely different. Leave aside the same song for another show, right? So that's the beauty of the music. That's something that the music has gifted us. It's kept us there because we're singing something new each time. We are also, as musicians, experiencing something new with the same music each time, which is evident from our facial expressions, evident from the chemistry that happens on stage. If somebody plays something beautifully, everyone's going like, wow, that was so nice. And that's instant because everyone has heard it. So there's no hiding behind that.
Yeah.
It's out there,
It's out there. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I actually would also like to talk about one other aspect of the show. So,
Hmm.
I feel holding your ground emotionally, artistically becomes even more nuanced when the work itself is steeped in a kind of a cultural tension. And
Hmm.
especially with O Gaanewali, right? A lot of it also revolves around something maybe as misunderstood as sensuality.
Hmm.
And sensuality, not spectacle but as a self expression, I think that feels
Hmm.
radical even in today's so called progressive, constantly evolving world. And sensuality was a part of the Gaanewali aesthetic, right? Not to
Yeah.
titillate but just
Yeah. Yeah.
to express agency. So taking on
Yeah.
legacy work like O Gaanewali means you're not just singing, you're also stepping into that cultural conversation, and
Yeah.
that I would believe could be a tricky terrain. Were there any moments where you faced any pushback, misunderstanding? And at these moments, how do you hold your ground artistically and I think emotionally as well?
Hmm. There have been many moments. There continue to be moments where there has been pushback. One of those moments really hurt me personally. Uh, I I come from a fairly reputed college in Mumbai, and I was planning to perform the show there, and we had almost finished figuring all the logistics out, and then they got back to me saying we only have one issue. Can you change the name of the show? I said, why? They said, because Gaanewali means prostitute, na. I said, no, first of all. And secondly, that's exactly what we're changing. That's the premise of the show. We're trying to change the meaning of the word as it was used before. It shouldn't be an insult. One who sings Gaanewali, why is that an insult, right? Why can't it be looked at as something beautiful? And that's exactly what we're trying to show through this concert. So we didn't do that show over there, and till date we have not performed there yet. And even though I know some folks involved in the decision making have personally apologized to me for it, but it felt like a personal attack, because that's the space that gave me my ideology and my thought process as a feminist, as somebody who is so deeply connected to the academic disciplines that I came from. So if I'm not allowed to talk about what my own college taught me, that just feels ridiculous, right? So that examples like these, there were again moments where some artists who really deeply follow Shobha Gurtu as an artist once took objection to the fact that her photo was a part of the poster that had the word Gaanewali on it. They said, why is her photo there? She fought so hard in her life to change this about the women who sang. And now you're putting her photo under the word Gaanewali. So this is a tricky moment because what they're saying is not wrong. These women were living in a time where the only way to distance yourself from an identity that you didn't want was to absolutely turn it over its head. So a lot of women musicians, you'll hear the suffix Devi after their names, Nirmala Devi, Girija Devi. That was to denote that they are not bais, they are not, but they're married and are now Devis. So they are not sexually
Respectable,
abused women.
the point,
Correct?
yeah.
Correct. So, but this had to be done. Why did it have to be done? That's the question that we need to ask, not the fact that we've put a photo of somebody, right? So it's a delicate balance where it would be inappropriate for me to go and say that, hey, you guys don't understand what we're doing, because their perspective is coming from um context of hate that Shobha Tai got. They don't want to be associated with that. They want her music to be celebrated. So that those kind of things have to be handled very sensitively. And I think even though I in the moment I was very upset saying that they don't understand what we're doing, on further reflection I realized that these are things that can't be looked at just through the lens of your own ideology in present time, because there has been so much that has happened. You're stepping into it. You are stepping into it. They already are there. So, how are you going to now look at a situation that has historical context and you're trying to change that without offending people by explaining things to them in a way that will reach them and not offend them? So these are still the kind of things that we go through as artists performing this show. And it's better now because I think enough people have watched the show to know what it is about. But it shouldn't have been this difficult, right?
Simple. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you know what you're trying to change over here is years and years of a mindset. And
yeah,
while it does not happen in a day, and you will constantly, I mean, that was not the first roadblock. I'm sure that will not be the last. I
yeah,
mean, as I said, right, all those sensuality as a form of self-expression is still a radical expression, right? We are
yeah.
still looked down upon. What are women wearing? Why are they behaving like this? And you're right, Gaanewali, Nachnewali just used to be a term for women who were not considered to be respectable or were, in slightly amorous professions, to say the least.
Hmm.
And it's heartbreaking, but I think it's movements like these that, make a change, there's
Yeah.
a quote I always go back to where Michelangelo said, right, trifles don't make perfection, but perfection is a trifle. So I think these little things add up, and I think what you're doing will really add up to that. So, and I think the resistance will fade with time. I mean, we have to give it
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
It's
I'm
yeah.
sure. I
But
think
I
it
think
already
it's
has faded.
but thank you so much for sharing that with us, Avanti. I think it was really heartfelt. I just, want to ask you something from like a personal point of view. You're classically
Yeah,
trained. You're
yeah.
also a creator of modern narrative work. At
Hmm.
some time, do you feel that you are breaking the rules? And how do you make your peace with your own evolution? I know a little bit of it because I did some classical music training when I was younger, and we were told very specifically, right, this is how a rag works, this is the pattern,
Hmm.
this is what.
Hmm.
And
Structure.
then I actually saw this interview of Hari Haran when this was the time when he was doing those duets with Leslie Lewis, right? And
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
song
Hmm.
came out, and there was a stream of saregama which was incorrect, and Hariharan says that that was
Hmm.
the toughest part for me to do, but for the sake of music and for rhythm we were doing it. And he's like, that one line, I recorded the entire song, but that one line took me so long because I couldn't get it in my
Yeah,
head that, oh, I have to do it incorrectly for the sake of music and beat. How do
yeah,
you
yeah,
grapple
yeah.
with it?
I think, like you said, as a child, something that you probably experienced and something that I experienced and I saw in some students as well. It's difficult to relate to being a person who learns classical music because it's not cool, right? It's not seen as a cool thing to do. So in school, if you tell people that, hey, I'm going for my classical music class, the first thing is not going to be, oh, wow, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you grapple with the identity of not being cool when the only thing you want as a school going kid is to be cool,
Just to be cool,
right?
yeah.
So that becomes I think that is something that took me also some time to understand, to place my identity alongside the identity of the girl who's also been learning classical music for so many years in her life, has done whatever xyz degrees in classical music, and still identifies as a feminist, still can be critical of the things that are said in classical music that she doesn't agree with, right? Still can refuse to say that I refuse to sing compositions that demean women, right? So all of these things have taken their own sweet time to come to the surface for me, and I think I'm also still finding out what it is that I'm okay with and what it is that I'm not okay with. And everybody who goes through this is likely to face it.
Yeah, and being rooted in traditional, I mean, being traditional, also being a feminist, just seems like such contrarian views to people, right? Because people often feel you can be one or the other, and that is
Yeah,
not true. It is a constantly evolving landscape. We're just coming to the end of the show, Avanti. I would just like to ask you like a couple more questions. Um,
yeah, sure.
just before we conclude, when you think of O Gaanewali, not as a show, but as a personal marker in your life, what does
Hmm.
what does it represent for you? Is it a reclaiming? Is it a reverence? Or I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what does it mean for you personally?
I think personally it is a wonderful way to bring my identity together, because I didn't think that I would be able to bring two parts of my life which have parallelly existed and thrived within their own streams together. So this show has allowed me to do that, and allowed me to do it in an organic way, allowed me to do it in a way that doesn't feel impostery to me, doesn't feel fake to me. This is who I am, and I am very comfortable with being this person who can still sing a classical bandish, a rag, a thumri, a ghazal, and still you know identify with everything. That maybe I'm an atheist, I'm a feminist, there are so many parts of my identity that I hold true to myself, and I don't let it interfere with my music. So how can those two come together? So this show has allowed me to see that and see it through for myself.
It's poetic, that O Gaanewali is a show about voices. And now here we are, closing with yours. If you could just leave one thought behind to a younger artist who's trying to find their voice in a noisy world, what would you tell them, not as advice, but as something that you have lived and you've learned?
Yeah, yeah. I always wonder, what am I going to say for this question? Because this question is always there. But I've realized that really the only thing to say is be consistent, because this is something that discipline really goes a long way, and discipline across everything. Be consistent with your practice. Be consistent with, maybe if you're posting something online, just be consistent with that. Be consistent with creation. Be consistent with your daily disciplines. All these may seem like small things, but I've really learned that 15 minutes of something every single day still trumps 3 hours of something on one day. So it's just that, be consistent.
I think that's great, Avanti. Thank you so much for joining us on School of Purpose. I think this was a brilliant podcast. It was so refreshing. It was so different. And I loved to hear how authentic you were. You chose to be vulnerable, you chose to be honest, you chose to be authentic. So thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you, Mansi. I'm glad. I'm glad I could be a part of it.
And to our viewers, I would like to say that not every change begins with noise. Some are sung in tumris and told in whispers. So
Oh,
I would like to, yeah, I would really like to thank Avanti for reminding us that legacy isn't what we inherit, but it's also what we choose to remember. So until next time, keep listening for what history almost forgot to tell you. Thank you so much for tuning in.